picture this. You're scanning a muddy field in North Yorkshire, UK, with a metal detector.
Right, just a standard day out in the mud.
Exactly. And suddenly you get a massive signal, like the kind of signal that makes your heart race, you know.
Oh, absolutely. The dream scenario.
But when you actually start digging, you don't find this neat little pot of glittering Roman gold. You don't find silver coins.
No, you pull up something that honestly looks like garbage at first glance.
Yeah. Heavy, twisted, scorched, completely unrecognizable chunks of iron and copper. I mean, you might initially think it's just modern agricultural junk.
Like pieces of a broken tractor or something.
Right, but by pulling that twisted metal out of the mud, you'd actually be holding the key to completely rewriting British history.
Which is exactly what makes the 2021 discovery by a detectorist named Peter Heads so incredibly monumental.
It really is. And so our mission for you today on this deep dive is to unpack this specific discovery. We're looking at a 2026 study published in the journal Antiquity.
Focusing on what are now officially known as the Melsonby Iron Age hoards.
Yes, the Melsonby hoards. We are going to explore how this massive, buried pile of seemingly destroyed metal provided the very first definitive evidence of four-wheeled wagons in Iron Age Britain.
Which is a huge deal technologically, but perhaps more importantly, we're going to look at the psychology behind it.
Right, the why.
Exactly. We have to unravel the mystery of why an incredibly powerful, ancient elite community deliberately took a staggering fortune, mutilated it, and just buried it in the ground.
So to start, I mean, the scale of this discovery is the first thing we really need to wrap our minds around.
Oh, the scale is massive. The researchers cataloged over 950 individual objects.
Wow.
Yeah, and by their calculations, these are the fragmented remains of about 300 complete, highly valuable items.
And the timing is wild too, right?
It is. Radiocarbon dating places this entire deposit in a very tight, very turbulent window of time, roughly between 35 BC and 40 AD.
So we're talking about the late Iron Age.
The absolute twilight of independent Britain. The shadow of the Roman Empire is looming large over the continent, and, it's edging closer and closer to their shores.
And the material they buried it wasn't just random sweepings from a blacksmith floor.
Not at all. The assemblage is roughly 2/3 copper alloy and 1/3 iron.
Let's put you right on the edge of that first excavation ditch. The researchers dubbed it Hoard 1. At the bottom of this pit, archaeologists found 28 massive iron tyres.
And they weren't just tossed in, which is fascinating.
Right. They had been violently bent out of shape, like completely deformed, but then they were carefully and deliberately stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, the contrast between the violence and the care is striking. And entangled inside and around this stack of warped iron were horse harnesses.
And not just any harnesses. These were adorned with bright red Mediterranean coral studs.
Which tells a profound story all on its own. I mean, the presence of Mediterranean coral in North Yorkshire maps out this extensive, highly sophisticated trade network.
Because that coral had to be harvested from the Mediterranean seabed, right?
Exactly. Traded all across the continent, brought over the English Channel, and transported hundreds of miles north. It was the ultimate luxury material of its day.
Like an exotic import that just screamed immense wealth.
And cosmopolitan connections, yeah.
So after the tyres and the coral harnesses, the people burying this hoard took a giant 35-liter copper alloy cauldron.
A massive feasting vessel.
Yeah, and they placed it upside down over the top of this tangled pile. And then while the pit was still open, someone threw a massive boulder directly onto the cauldron.
Just completely crushing it into the pile.
Before they finally filled the ditch with dirt.
The choreography of that burial is it's striking. It reads less like discarding trash and much more like a highly structured execution of wealth.
Okay, let's unpack this with a modern analogy, because it's not like finding a buried treasure chest of savings.
No, not at all.
It is much closer to, say, a billionaire buying a fleet of bespoke Bugattis,
Right.
Completely dismantling them, taking blowtorches and sledgehammers to the custom rims, piling the wreckage into a ditch, throwing a custom designer chandelier on top, and then just crushing it all with a wrecking ball.
That is a highly accurate way to view it, actually.
You hear about modern luxury fashion brands burning unsold inventory to maintain their brand's exclusivity. This feels like the ancient heavy metal version of that.
Exactly. These items, the vehicles, the imported harnesses, the cauldron, they represented the absolute pinnacle of Iron Age luxury and engineering.
And the crazy part is the Melsonby site didn't just have one ditch.
Right. About 25 meters away from Hoard 1, they located Hoard 2.
But the conditions were entirely different there.
Completely different. Over 2 millennia, the entire contents of Hoard 2 had fused together into a single, solid block of dirt, rock, and iron corrosion.
Which I imagine presents a massive problem if you are an archaeologist. I mean, you take a chisel to a solid block of rust, you're going to destroy the fragile evidence trapped inside.
You'd lose everything. So instead of risking that destruction in a muddy field, the excavation team lifted the entire block out of the earth completely intact.
Wow.
Yeah, and they transported it to the University at Southampton, where they utilized industrial CT scanning technology.
I really want to look closely at how that actually works because it's fascinating to me.
It's incredible tech.
Because a standard hospital X-ray or MRI wouldn't be able to make sense of a solid block of iron oxide and dirt.
No, it would just look like a giant blur. But industrial CT scanners use incredibly powerful X-rays to map the varying densities inside an object.
Oh, okay. So iron absorbs X-rays differently than copper.
Exactly, which absorbs them differently than soil or organic material. So by taking thousands of X-ray slices, a computer can build a high-resolution 3D model of the inside of the block.
Without anyone ever lifting a trowel. That's wild.
And the results of those scans were revelatory. Inside this rusted mass, the computer revealed another densely packed bundle.
More vehicle parts.
More horse harnesses, actually, plus iron spears and these long copper alloy tubes. But the most vital piece of data came from the edges of the block.
Oh, the textiles.
Yes. The CT scans, combined with microscopic analysis, detected traces of mineralized textiles.
Now, cloth obviously doesn't just survive for 2,000 years in damp British soil.
Definitely not.
But looking at the source material, the mechanism here is that as the iron weapons and vehicle parts rusted, the iron corrosion products slowly seeped into the fibers of the cloth wrapped around them.
Right, so over centuries, the rust completely replaced the organic material. It essentially turns the fabric into a fossil made of iron.
It creates a perfect cast of the textile.
Exactly, and the presence of that mineralized fabric wrapping around the entire mass of weapons indicates that Hoard 2 had been carefully bundled in cloth before it was placed in the ground.
It was a curated offering, essentially.
Yes, a packaged offering.
So we have a very clear, vivid picture of what was pulled out of the earth. But looking through the sources, we need to address a glaring question here.
Okay, what's that?
The study claims this is the first definitive evidence of four-wheeled wagons in Iron Age Britain.
Right.
But, we already knew that Iron Age Britons had wheels. We have those famous, glamorous chariot burials from the Yorkshire wolds dating back centuries before Melsonby.
Oh, absolutely. They were already driving around.
Right. So why are the researchers so incredibly certain that these specific mutilated scraps belong to four-wheeled wagons, something never before proven to exist in Britain?
What's fascinating here is how they used mechanical logic to prove their case. They were looking for forensic components that simply do not exist on two-wheeled vehicles.
Okay, like what?
The most crucial piece of evidence they identified was the kingpin.
The kingpin. Okay, let's break down the mechanics of a kingpin, because if you aren't an automotive engineer, that term might not mean much.
Fair enough. A kingpin is a heavy, vertical pivot mechanism. It's the essential piece of hardware that connects a steering axle to the main body of a vehicle.
So it's what lets you steer.
Exactly. It allows the front wheels to pivot left and right independently of the back wheels and the wagon bed.
Oh, I see.
You only need a kingpin if you have a four-wheeled vehicle. On a two-wheeled cart or a chariot, the entire vehicle turns dynamically when the horse turns. The axle is fixed.
Right, because it's just balancing on that one axle.
Exactly. So a kingpin serves absolutely zero mechanical purpose on a two-wheeled chariot.
So finding a kingpin in an Iron Age ditch is like finding an airplane propeller in a barn.
Yeah.
You know immediately you are not looking at the remains of a bicycle.
That's a great way to put it. It fundamentally changes the classification of the machine.
And the mechanical evidence compounds from there, right?
Oh, yeah. The CT scans and the physical excavation also revealed these unusual, oversized, U-shaped iron brackets.
What were they for?
Well, these brackets feature massive nails protruding from them, clearly designed to be driven into very thick wooden elements like a heavy, weight-bearing axle.
Which a light chariot wouldn't have.
Exactly. These brackets are completely absent from any of the light, nimble, two-wheeled chariots previously found in Britain. However, they perfectly match the hub collars of four-wheeled wagons found over in continental Europe.
And the sheer size of the components backs this up as well. You mentioned the light chariots. But the iron tires they pulled out of Hoard 1 were colossal.
Huge. Up to 1.08 meters across.
That's over 3.5 feet in diameter for a single wheel.
Yeah, and based on the sheer volume of parts, the number of tires, and the duplicate harness fittings, the researchers estimate this single ditch contained the remains of at least 7 distinct vehicles.
7. The scale is just industrial.
It really is. And to visualize what these vehicles actually looked like before they were destroyed, the researchers point us across the water to Denmark.
To the Debjerg wagons, right?
Yes, exactly. These were 2 incredibly ornate, 4-wheeled wagons found preserved in a Danish peat bog dating to roughly the same period.
And they were super fancy.
Incredibly. They featured decorative copper alloy tubes, intricate finials, which are, ornamental knobs on the woodwork, and metal openwork.
Which is where the metal is cast or hammered with intricate lace-like gaps to create complex patterns.
Right. And the stylistic echoes between the Debjerg bog in Denmark and the Melsonby ditch in Yorkshire are undeniable. The copper tubes and decorative fittings match almost perfectly.
That completely shatters the old assumption that Iron Age Britain was some isolated, primitive backwater.
Completely. They were deeply plugged into the most advanced continental technological and stylistic trends.
Which actually brings us to the friction point of this entire discovery. The fact that these were pristine, highly advanced imported luxury items actually creates our biggest problem.
Right, the destruction.
Yeah. It is one thing to throw away broken trash. It is entirely another to take the Iron Age equivalent of a fleet of luxury cars and physically obliterate them.
Why inflict so much violence on something so incredibly valuable?
And the violence on these objects is profound. I mean, we mentioned the tires being bent out of shape. You don't just bend a 3-foot-wide, inch-thick iron wagon tire over your knee.
No, you'd need extreme heat.
Exactly. The researchers found traces of hematite on the iron tires. Hematite is a specific type of iron oxide. It doesn't just form naturally in damp soil.
Right, it requires blazing temperatures.
Upwards of 800 degrees Celsius in an oxygen-rich environment.
This proves they weren't just using brute force, they were using pyrotechnic engineering.
They built massive roaring fires.
Specifically to heat these thick iron tires until the metal softened enough to physically warp and fold them.
And scattered throughout the ditch, alongside the warped iron, the team found partially melted copper objects, droplets of melted blue glass, and melted silver.
The heat was intense.
But looking at all this melted bent metal, we have to stress test an alternative theory here. Because if you show me a massive pile of valuable metal that has been broken down, my modern brain immediately jumps to recycling.
Sure, that makes sense.
If you are an ancient society, metal is hard to come by.
Yeah.
Couldn't this just be an ancient scrapyard? Like a metal worker's stash that they buried for safekeeping so they could dig it up later, melt it all down, and forge new swords or tools?
It's a highly logical theory. And in fact, it was the leading hypothesis for a similar, smaller hoard found nearby back in the 1840s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but when you examine the Melsonby evidence closely, the scrapyard theory completely collapses.
Why is that?
First, the site completely lacks any of the infrastructure of a metalworker. There are no crucibles for melting metal, no casting waste, no slag, no anvils, and no tools.
But even without a workshop, couldn't they just be, storing the raw materials?
Well, if you look at the objects themselves, that idea falls apart too. The horse bits show almost zero wear and tear. They were practically brand new.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, consider the adornments. As we discussed, many of these bronze harness fittings were decorated with fragile blue glass, delicate red enamel, and that rare Mediterranean coral. These highly fragile materials were still perfectly attached to the bronze when they were thrown into the fire and buried.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah. If you are a pragmatic metal worker melting down scrap to make a sword, you are going to meticulously strip that precious imported coral off first. You don't toss imported gems into a blazing furnace.
Which kills the recycling theory entirely. Nobody throws away diamonds to melt down a gold ring.
Exactly. The destruction wasn't practical. It was highly structured, deliberate, and symbolic.
Okay, so if this wasn't an ancient recycling center, it had to be a ritual. But who was performing it, and who was it for?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to pull back and look at the geopolitical map of first-century Britain. The Melsonby site is located just 800 meters from a place called Stanwick.
And the study highlights Stanwick as a massive oppidum. For anyone unfamiliar with that term, an oppidum isn't just a village.
No, it's a massive, fortified, late Iron Age settlement.
It functioned as an economic hub, a defensive stronghold, and essentially a royal city. Stanwix was the probable seat of power for a vast tribal confederacy known as the Brigantes.
And the Brigantes controlled a massive swath of northern Britain. The radiocarbon dating places the Melsonby Hoards roughly in the era of Queen Cardamondua.
Who was a very famous and controversial Brigantian ruler.
Extremely controversial. As the Roman Empire was brutally conquering southern Britain, Cardamondua recognized the writing on the wall. She allied her tribe with Rome, leveraging their military backing to maintain her own grip on power over rival factions within her confederacy.
And the precise dates of the artifacts suggest this specific hoard might have been dedicated slightly earlier, perhaps, to Cardamondua's parent or grandparent.
Right.
But it places this intense act of destruction firmly within the absolute highest echelons of Iron Age royal politics, right as the pressure cooker of Roman expansion was reaching a boiling point.
In a tribal confederacy, power is constantly negotiated. You keep rivals in line and allies loyal through displays of untouchable strength.
And the items they buried give us direct insight into how these royals operated socially. It wasn't just transportation technology, they buried the infrastructure of massive elite feasts.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look closer at that giant 35-liter cauldron that got crushed by the boulder.
Yes. The researchers noted that the base of this cauldron features a very specific repoussé motif.
Right, repoussé being a metalworking technique where the metal is hammered from the back to create a raised, three-dimensional design on the front.
Exactly. And the design they hammered into this massive soup pot was of swirling water and fish, specifically resembling trout or salmon.
Now, to a modern observer, putting a fish on a cauldron seems entirely mundane, but the dietary record of the British Iron Age tells a very different story.
This is one of my favorite quirks of the period. Because despite living on an island, surrounded by an ocean and crisscrossed by rivers teeming with life, fish bones practically vanish from the archaeological dietary record of Iron Age Britons for centuries.
It's wild. There is a highly documented, though still debated, pattern suggesting they had a strict cultural or religious taboo against eating fish.
So for an elite family to commission, own, and display a massive feasting vessel, specifically decorated with an animal, the culture considers taboo. That's a profound statement.
It's an artifact of elite display that is actively breaking the cultural rules.
Exactly. Imagine you are a lesser chieftain invited to a feast at Stanwix. The rulers serve you from a giant vessel decorated with a taboo creature. It's a psychological flex.
They are showing off that they are so powerful, so cosmopolitan, and perhaps so deeply influenced by the Romans or the continent that the old local taboos simply do not apply to them.
They are above the law.
Right. When we synthesize all these findings, the mechanism of social power becomes clear. We have elite rule-breaking art. We have the pyrotechnic destruction of the most advanced imported transportation technology of the day.
We have the sacrifice of rare Mediterranean goods.
What you are looking at is the ultimate weaponization of economics. It is conspicuous consumption.
The leaders of the Brigantes were taking a staggering community fortune, ritually killing it by bending and burning it and burying it in the earth. If you are a rival watching this happen, what goes through your mind?
You're intimidated.
You are going to think twice before attacking a tribe that has such an unbelievable abundance of resources that they can afford to literally set it on fire and throw it in a ditch. It was political theater designed to cement authority.
And the researchers strongly believe this theater was likely tied to a massive elite funerary event.
Like a burial.
Yes. This mirrors incredibly wealthy burials we see further south in Britain during the same exact period as local leaders tried to cement their status in a rapidly changing world.
Right. Sites like the Folly Lane or Lexden burials.
Exactly. They feature similar destruction of immense wealth alongside the deceased.
So we started with a metal detectorist pulling rusted iron out of the mud. And by mapping the evidence, we now have the very first definitive proof that highly engineered four-wheel transport existed in Iron Age Britain. We understand how industrial CT scanning can peer through solid rock to find ghost impressions of ancient textiles. And we have this incredibly visceral cinematic glimpse into the political theater of the Brigantes tribe, deliberately torching their own wealth to project power right as the shadow of the Roman Empire was falling over their borders.
It forces a complete paradigm shift. We can no longer view this period as a static, primitive past, but rather as a dynamic, highly strategic, and deeply connected society.
It really does. But, looking at the comparisons to those southern burials at Lexington and Folly Lane, there is a glaring hole in this funerary theater theory.
Yes, there is.
The sources make a point to highlight a massive absence at Melsonby. From Folly Lane had graves, Lexington had graves, but at Melsonby, despite the massive cache of funerary feasting gear, and despite the chemical proof of objects being thrown onto a blazing ritual pyre, there are absolutely no human remains in these ditches. The researchers found a few scattered cremated animal bones, but completely zero evidence of a human body. We have the funeral, we have the feast, we have the pyre, but we are missing the dead.
This raises an important question. From our modern perspective, we assume that a funeral fundamentally requires a body to act as the focal point of the monument.
Right. If there is no body, how can it be a grave?
But what if, for the Brigantes, the physical remains of the person were secondary, perhaps scattered to the wind or rivers in a way that left no archaeological trace?
Wait, so what if the sheer scale of the destroyed wealth was the monument?
Exactly. It invites you to consider what it means if the most powerful people in Iron Age Britain believed that burning and burying their most advanced technology and luxurious art was more important for cementing their legacy than preserving the memory of the dead themselves.
Wow. That is definitely something to mull over.